Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 2, An Experiment in Literary Investigation, 1918 to 1956, Gulag Archipelago v. 02. In The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 2, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn takes us on a harrowing journey through the bleak world of forced labor camps in Soviet Russia, which were littered throughout the country like a hidden archipelago. Following its inception in 1918 under Lenin's rule, thousands of gulags were established, imprisoning millions in deplorable conditions. The book explores brutal interrogation tactics, the grievous living conditions, and the psychological impact on the diverse mix of prisoners, including loyal communists, women, children, and independent thinkers. Delving deep into this dark period of Russian history, this summary aims to unveil the atrocities that took place under the veil of secrecy.
The dark reality of the Soviet labor camps. The Soviet Union's forced labor camps, known as gulags, were a network of islands spreading throughout the country. These camps served as a new form of prison, following the principles of compulsion for the working class. The first gulag, Solovki, set the foundation for future camps, and the archipelago continued to grow in the dense forests and barren lands of the region. Although their origin dates back to before World War I, it was following World War II that these camps hardened into a massive workforce. With no families to look after, Gulag prisoners could be easily moved from place to place, and the Soviet Union used them to address pressing economic concerns of building and growth. The brutality of arrest and imprisonment in Gulag Archipelago. Millions of Russians were arrested and sent to the Gulag Archipelago without any reason or explanation. Working and possibly dying at the camps became their new norm. The organs, those responsible for the arrests, could arrest anyone at any time without a crime to accuse them of. Their main goal was to meet the quotas set by Stalin, and anyone who opposed the dictatorship of the proletariat was a likely target. Even the teaching of religion was considered a crime, and those found guilty were given 10 years imprisonment. Many were falsely accused of hoarding gold or having illegal radio receivers. Independent thinkers and small business owners were also targeted. A visit from the organs would mean losing one's previous life and being forced to work at the harsh camps. The dark history of torture in Russia. From Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich to the Soviet era, the use of torture in Russia has undergone several shifts. Despite being prohibited under Catherine the Great, the practice resurfaced during the socialist movement of the 20th century. Soviet authorities falsely accused citizens and used medieval torture methods during interrogations to force confessions. Psychological tactics like sleep deprivation and physical violence such as cigarette burns, iron clamps, and acid baths were common. Despite being illegal in the Code of Criminal Procedure, torture continued to happen, with interrogators citing communist ideology as justification. The horrific reality of Gulag Archipelago. The trains used for transport to the Gulag Archipelago were no ordinary trains, as they were equipped with sealed prisoner cars that had no windows and seats, reinforced walls, ceilings and floors. Loaded in the night, prisoners were subjected to constant terror by being pat down frequently, having their hair cut off and denied water for days to avoid toilet issues. The journey could be several days to several weeks depending on the destination. Life and death in the Gulag. The Gulag Archipelago was a place of punishment and hard labor, where prisoners worked from sunrise to sunset, doing tasks such as mining, manufacturing, and logging. Life in the Gulag was characterized by starvation, deprivation, and constant danger. Prisoners were given only basic food, accommodation, and clothing, which often fell apart quickly. With death a constant presence, prisoners knew that their only hope for early release was through dying. Life in the Gulag was a slow kind of dying, with little that separated it from the life of an animal. Despite the harsh reality, prisoners learned to cope and survive, with many forming close bonds with their fellow inmates. Life in the Gulag Archipelago. The Gulag Archipelago was home to 3 distinct groups of people: loyal communists, women, and children. For loyalists, life was especially difficult and their loyalty was ultimately betrayed. Women faced daily harassment and were subject to sexual abuse. Children, including orphans and juvenile delinquents, were also sent to the labor camps. The punishments for even minor crimes were severe, with stealing a potato earning an 8-year sentence and taking a cucumber resulting in 5 years of hard labor. Despite attempts to rationalize their misfortune, prisoners came to realize that no one deserved to be in the Gulag Archipelago. The tragic wastefulness of Gulag labor. The Gulag Archipelago was an ineffective labor force that resulted in the destruction of tools, infrastructure, and the prisoners themselves. The prisoners lacked skills, incentives, and motivation, resulting in poorly made products. The only reliable output of the archipelago was corrupted souls, as even the purest person became savage to survive. Escape from the archipelago was impossible due to geography and the constant threat of being turned in for rewards. The price of freedom. Life in the Gulag Archipelago was suffocating, and prisoners who dared to escape were met with brutal consequences that deterred others from trying. Writing was a way of leaving a legacy for some, but even that came with risk. Surviving in the Gulag Archipelago was incredibly tough. Prisoners were treated worse than animals, and those who tried to escape were dealt with ruthlessly, making such an attempt akin to a death sentence. Despite this, there were committed escapers who spent most of their days preparing for escape, but it was not for a chance at a better life, they were preparing for what could easily be their demise. Escaping was a serious business that required absolute secrecy, which was hard to come by when even sympathy towards prisoners was punishable by death. The fear of escapees was very real, and stories about them were a real deterrent. If prisoners did manage to escape, they never told their stories for fear of the repercussions that others would face for their freedom. Despite all of this, some prisoners were determined to document their experiences in the Gulag Archipelago, although they risked losing their manuscript or their life in the process. The price of freedom in the Gulag Archipelago was high, and the risk was not worth it for most. Nonetheless, prisoners never gave up hope and some found solace in writing. Solzhenitsyn, the author of the book, spent 8 years in prison, during which he wrote a poem that he never forgot. His words, along with those of other writers who dared to document their experiences, provided a rare glimpse into life in the Gulag Archipelago and serve as a reminder of the human spirit's resiliency in the face of adversity. Recounting the truth of exile. Exile, as a form of punishment, predates prisons. Even during Stalin's reign, exile was used as an internal punishment for Gulag detainees. With Stalin's death, the Gulag Archipelago began to recede, with its prisoners being freed. However, readjusting to life outside the archipelago had its own challenges for former prisoners. Nevertheless, the natives of the archipelago never lost hope that their stories would one day be heard.
Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 2, exposes the horrifying chapters of forced labor camps in the Soviet Union, where millions suffered and perished in appalling conditions. Despite the labor being largely worthless, these camps fulfilled their political purpose of frightening and suppressing the nation. While the death of Stalin in 1953 led to the eventual release of many archipelago natives, the challenges of reintegration and the bitter memories remained. With this book, Solzhenitsyn uncovers the hidden secrets of the Gulag Archipelago, and in doing so, underscores the importance of remembering and learning from history's darkest moments.